Welcome to Stephen FM AI, Ireland's Daily Digest. Today, we're opening the notebook on some pretty wild excerpts from a document called Trump Unbound. And let me tell you, it outlines a complete, radical reshaping of, well, pretty much everything, both global and domestic policy.
We're going to break this all down into 4 key areas. First, we'll look at how the world is basically being put up for sale. Then we'll dive into the war at home, the global backlash that's brewing, and finally, what this all could mean for a new world order.
All right, let's jump right in. The very first big aha moment from this source is how the whole idea of a country is being, well, rewritten. We're talking about a shift away from a system based on international rules, the way things have been for decades, to one that's all about personal deals.
So what if a country, and not just any country, a NATO ally, was treated like a piece of real estate? That's exactly what this is about. The source talks about this fast and furious foreign policy, and the prime example is the absolute intention to acquire Greenland. It was apparently even called our territory.
And look, this wasn't just some off-the-cuff remark. The document actually details how military and economic muscle were used as leverage. First, a threat of force against Denmark, a NATO ally, mind you. Then you've got these massive tariff threats hanging over Canada and the UK. The source even hints that the stock markets are being played with, making threats and then pulling them back just to create some chaos.
Now, what's really fascinating is that this whole deal-making thing goes way beyond just grabbing territory. It extends to the very structure of how the world is run, with a plan to completely bypass big institutions like the United Nations.
It's called the Board of Peace, and it's basically an alternative body where Trump is the personal head. The source describes it as him acting like a mafia boss. Think about that. Instead of international law, it's all about personal loyalty. And the guest list? Well, it reportedly includes authoritarian leaders like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping.
And, getting a seat at this new table, it is not cheap. The source says nations are being asked to cough up $1 billion membership fee. $1 billion, just to get in the room.
So where does this board focus first? The reconstruction of Gaza. And this quote really tells you everything about the mindset. The source says Trump didn't describe it as a humanitarian crisis, but like a real estate developer, calling it a beautiful piece of property. Okay, so let's shift gears to the second pillar here, because that global disruption, that's only half the story. The document details a connected, simultaneous transformation happening right on American soil.
The source calls it a domestic reign of terror. We're talking about the largest immigration enforcement operation in U.S. history, targeting specific communities with what's described as state-sanctioned force. So what does that look like on the ground? Well, the document paints a pretty stark picture. Thousands of masked federal agents, no badges, reports of them just entering homes without warrants, and a climate of fear so thick it's apparently affecting U.S. citizens. In just one city, Minneapolis, the source reports 2 fatal shootings by these agents in just a matter of weeks.
And here's the kicker: accountability. When people started asking about oversight, the policy's architect, Stephen Miller, reportedly just claimed these agents operate with federal immunity. That's a claim that obviously raises some huge constitutional questions. So this leads us right into our third major point. All these policies, they're creating this powerful ripple effect, right? Both at home and abroad. And it's sparking a massive global backlash.
First up, you have this phenomenon the source actually calls the Donald Dash, a record number of Americans apparently trying to leave the country.
And get this. According to the document, the number of U.S. citizens seeking asylum right here in Ireland has more than quadrupled. It went from 22 in previous years to 94 last year. I mean, that is a stunning reversal of a century of migration patterns. People are now looking to get away from the American dream, not chase.
So who's leaving? Well, the source says it's really 2 distinct groups. You've got wealthy retirees moving their money out of the country. Applications for those kinds of visas are up 90%. And then you have vulnerable groups, like transgender families, who the source says are terrified of being put in camps and facing total erasure.
And at the exact same time, you've got traditional allies starting to wake up. The source says they're realizing that nostalgia is not a strategy and are actually getting ready to fight back against all this.
So the big EU-US trade deal? Officially on pause. French President Macron is threatening to unleash what he calls an economic bazooka, a seriously powerful tool to counter this kind of coercion. And you're seeing smaller powers like Denmark and the UK banding together to form new alliances to push back.
So
Let's connect the dots. What's the big picture here? We've talked about a plan to buy Greenland, a pay-to-play UN, a domestic crackdown, and this growing global resistance. These aren't just random, chaotic events. They're all pieces of a much larger puzzle.
The real narrative pivot here, the one big takeaway from the source, is this. None of this is happening by accident. It all represents a systematic attempt to just dismantle the post-war rules-based order and replace it with something totally different, something based on personal loyalty and cold, hard cash.
This document really paints a picture of a world on the brink of a massive, massive shift. So I gotta ask you, what do you find most significant here? The idea of literally buying Greenland? The billion-dollar board of peace? Or American citizens becoming asylum seekers? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and hey, make sure you subscribe for more deep dives like this one.
The source leaves us with a really critical question. Is this an expansion of American power, or is it the beginning of its decline? The evidence it presents suggests weirdly it could be both. The old rulebook is being ripped to shreds, but what comes next? Well, that is still very much up for grabs. And that's the latest from Stephen FMAI, Ireland's Daily Digest.